Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how I have set up this project that will allow me to show you guys all about HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and other web-based tools as we go forward. I'm able to actually host this with GitHub, which will allow you guys to access this on your own browser. I can quickly show you that you can actually go to Settings when you create a repository. And if you change the name to have .github.io, then you will actually be able to have it be hosted. And then whatever your master or your top branch is, that will be the branch that will publish whenever something is merged with in that branch. So here's the actual page. Okay. So when you hit the URL, it's going to go look for index.html. You can actually do a redirect to make it go to a different landing page if that is what you so choose to do. And that is what I did in my case. So instead of it going to youtube.code.github.io/index.html, I actually have that file in there and it has a redirect to my HTML folder. And the home.html file. The way I have structured and typically structure my stuff when I'm doing vanilla HTML, JavaScript, and CSS is I just have those 3 different folders and then the equivalent name for each one of those pages for each one of those files. So in this case, it'd be a home HTML, a home JS, and a home CSS. And here I have my next project already queued up. We'll talk about that later. But the idea is that I've got a header. I have a home button, which just takes me back here. This will be a list of links for my future projects, and then a basic footer. Now I could push this down. I happen to know that as these projects go on, this element here, which is a div, will increase, and so I'm just going to leave this, and therefore this really isn't my site right here. This is just to fill up the space on the page. My index.html, which is in the uppermost part of my GitHub repository, is pretty basic. We have our doc type HTML, which just allows the browser to know this file is in HTML. And then we have our HTML open tag, language of English and US. I have my head, and so this is not actually going to be displayed necessarily on the page. This will be all for the browser to display information. So we set the char set. This is just some metadata. We have our HTTP equiv refresh. This is going to be the URL that we want to redirect to. So again, that's our HTML folder and our home.html. We're going to use script, which is our JavaScript, in line with the file, the HTML file. So we're telling it that it's a JavaScript type and that this is where we want it to reference. It's going to be a page redirection, so that will show up in the tab if it for the millisecond that it's up. And then here is the redirect if it so happens to not automatically redirect for them. And they'll be able to click on a link which will say link to OneFinDog YouTube projects. Close the body, close the HTML tag. These are the files that are then one level lower. So these will be in my CSS folder, this will be in my HTML folder, and this will be in my JS folder. So we'll start with the home page, if you will. Again, looks similar up here. We do have a title, OneFinDog YouTube projects. And then I automatically load the header JS and the home JS and all of my CSS files. So I like to have a global one. I have one for the actual home page. So that'll be anything specific to this specific page. And then I have my header and my footer CSS. Notice though, I only have a header JS, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. So that is part of my head. In my body, I then have a header element, and in this header element, my JS will handle that in a little bit. I then have a div that I have a class card, and I did actually make this card class global, which we'll see in a little bit. And then I have a table, and so I'll have a table of all of the different links that I can have. For right now, I have one that's going to go to divecard.html, and it's just called dive scoreboard. And I have some empty ones here for now, just kind of waiting to fill those out. And then we close the table. Oh, wait. So we have a row. So table row is tr, and then td is table data. And so that inside your table data, you can have whatever you want. So I closed that. I had a couple other table datas. I do believe I want to have 3 columns, so that's kind of why I did that. So as a reminder to myself, close the row. So if I wanted to have another row, I would copy all of this to do that. Close the table, close the div, which is this card, close up our body, and at the end of that, I have my footer. So just like my header, I'll be handling that through my JS or JavaScript. Well, quick here. So I actually don't have any JavaScript specific to this page because it's really not doing much. It's just going to be the home base so that it holds all my links. However, if I ever decide to do anything with it, then this will allow me to do that then. So I have this onload function. It's going to call site title, which is right here. If the window location .href includes home.html, then it will add One Fin Dog YouTube projects to the page. Otherwise, it will not. I will have a header for each of those pages separately. The next is site navigation. Right now, all I have in there is, so I have 2 different arrays. I probably could do a 2D array, but right now I have 2 different arrays. So I've got my navigation list. So that's actually what's going to be displayed. And I've got navigation path, and that's going to be what the computer needs to know of where it needs to go when someone clicks that button. I then create the div, the opening div tag, and I give it the class name navigation list. I then go through a loop for the navigation list, and as it cycles through, it's going to add a anchor tag, and in that anchor, so for that list, so that's where it'll show what the name is. So this one will be capital HOME for home. But then I'm going to use that same index on the navigation path to actually tell it where it's going to go. And then I just automatically append .html. I add the closing div tag. It happens to be kind of weird sometimes. We will come back and revisit adding elements like this. This one actually happens to work like this though. This doesn't always work, and I haven't quite figured out exactly why, but sometimes when you split this, the browser will automatically add stuff to it, which can get aggravating a little bit. And then I add that whole header element to my document, .get element by ID of header. So it's going to search the whole document and find whatever element has the ID header. So if you have more than one, it'll add it to that. And then you're going to enter HTML. Make sure HTML are all in caps. And we're going to just add that to it. And then we have our site footer. That's going to be the last thing that gets called. In our site footer, we're going to, again, document.getElementById. The ID is going to be footer. Enter HTML. Make sure that HTML is capitalized. And then we're going to have this whole element, this div element. We're going to name it site footer, or have the class be site footer, and put in whatever you want. So in here I've got some text, I've got a link, and that's it. When you have an onload, you could only have one per HTML page. The way you get around this is if you want to have multiple files load when you, multiple JS files load when you do an onload and call different functions. I'll show you in a bit. It'll be in a future project, but there's a way around that. And you can do all like the way I'm going to show you in the future, or you can have one like this and then do the rest like in the other way. Point is, so far that I want to get across is you can have one window onload per HTML. So in this case, so to make that more specific, if I had one in the home, it's only going to load, it's going to load both of them, but the last one will override. So in this case, my home.js is after my header, and so whatever onload I have here would actually load and be permanent, because this one loads, but then this one will load on top of it. So this will get overridden. So for my footer, I have, for the actual ID, so if you have a hashtag or £, however you want to look at that, footer, that means that it's the ID footer. We're going to give it a padding all the way around, top, side, bottom of 20 pixels. The color is going to be of FB, FB, FF, and that is in hexadecimal. It's the most common way to do that. You can actually just type in white or blue or a name like that. I tend to like to actually give a nice color like this. You can be a little more specific with it. And I happen to actually look up some color schemes, still kind of working through all of that. So these are the colors I chose, and this is the background color. So color will be your text, background color will be the background of that element, and only that element. For the class of site footer, I wanted it to be centered, so that's where you do text align center. And then I wanted the color of anchor tags within the class of site footer to be this color, FB, FB, FF. You could do all anchor tags by just putting A and removing this, but I didn't want that. And I'm going to have other anchor tags higher up on the page, and I don't want them necessarily to be this color. If I do, I can always change that later. We're going to jump down here to header. Same thing. The ID of header is going to have padding 20 pixels. So this is the color scheme I chose. So I just wanted to put it there, since this is going to be my global CSS page. The body, I gave it 0 margin, and that's how you can call that out. So if you have a div, you can replace that with div, and that'll give every single div that margin, or whatever other CSS styles you put in here. This is my card class. So anytime I have a card on any page, I want it to be the same. And I just want to give it the class name card. So this gives us some box shadowing, which kind of makes it look like it's lifted off of the page a little bit, which I think is pretty cool. It's going to give it a margin of 20 pixels on top and bottom, and 40 pixels left and right. So if you have one here for margin and padding, that's going to be everything. If you have two, the first one will always be your top and your bottom. The second one will always be your left and your right. If you have three, the first will be your top, the middle will be your left and your right, and the third will be your bottom. If you have four, the first one will be your top, the next one will be your right, the third one would be your bottom, and the last one would be your left. And so for this padding is just going to be 15 pixels all the way around. And then I had just a class, so if I want something to be centered, I can just give it the class center, and it'll be centered. Home, again, doesn't have any specific styles at this point. And that wraps up what this page does. Thank you guys, and stay tuned. I will have my first real project on this site, Dive Scoreboard, will be coming up shortly. Thanks.